Are we live and direct?
We are live and direct.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so grateful that everybody has taken the time to join us on today's CMLS Hot Topics webinar. My name is Chris Creo, and I'm honored to be the CMLS Chair for 2019. And with me are panelists, along with the CMLS CEO, Danae Evans. And before I hand it over to Danae and the panelists for the purpose of why we're here, there are a few items that I want to, I just wanted to go over in the form of housekeeping before we actually begin. Yep, that's me, and that's Danae. That's a really bad picture of me. And it's good that we're here. Everybody's hopefully survived their fantasy football draft. And just before I came on here, I see that Alex Trebek has finished his chemotherapy and is back hosting. So all good news. And launching into that, we wanted to discuss the CMLX courses, just to remind everybody that we feel that as we drive participation and adoption of people being involved, staff, executives, and volunteers with the CMLS designations, that it will actually create a more learned and a more involved group of leaders making good decisions on MLS. And if you are familiar with the different levels, there's CMLX V, that's courses specifically for volunteers, so volunteer leadership. CMLX 1 is a self-paced online course. CMLX 2 is an interactive experience via webinar, very much like what we're doing now, that runs twice a year. And CMLX 3 is a very worthwhile course. I just finished our group project with the CMLX 3 designation ourselves, and I can tell you it was a great experience, not just to be challenged on some of the industry initiatives and to have those discussions, but I think to build a broader base of colleagues and friends in the industry to make those connections. Next slide. And if you weren't familiar, we happen to host this little event called the CMLS Annual Conference, and this year's CMLS 2019 conference we're calling the MLS Moment will be held in our good friend Brad Belke's backyard in Salt Lake City at the prestigious and very gorgeous location that I know they've been working hard and diligently on, the stunning Grand American Resort. The one thing that I want to share with everybody about this conference is that number one, if you haven't yet secured your rooms, that our host hotel is sold out, but to please check with CMLS staff going forward, as we do have drop-offs that happen as we approach the conference. So if you tried to make those reservations and you weren't able to get one, check with CMLS staff as we get closer to that as well. And in addition, we're very proud and very excited to announce that our keynote speaker is a comedian. His name is Ross Schaefer, and if you have any questions about him, Google him or YouTube Ross Schaefer, and that we actually plan to release the full agenda in a few weeks for those folks who are wondering what's going to be discussed on the agenda. Danae, is there anything that you would add?
I would add that if anybody has rooms that they know they're not going to use, please let us know so that we can get other people in the host hotel. We always appreciate keeping all of our people together, and we already have the whole hotel, so anybody who's not going to use rooms, please let us know as soon as possible.
Thank you, Danae. Next slide. So we're very excited about the self-assessment tool. We just released it, or are we going to release it?
Email went out about an hour ago.
Wonderful. I'll tell you, as an MLS that has gone through the self-assessment tool, it's a self-paced process, and I think sometimes it's difficult for us to go and compare what we're doing in our day-to-day businesses of managing and running MLSs and comparing to what you can be doing. It can be a very humbling experience, and I speak from experience on that, having gone through the self-assessment tool. But it is one that you'll be glad that you did. It's private. You go again. It's it's self-paced, and I think it's a good bellwether to see exactly, are you doing all that you should be doing as an MLS, or perhaps give you new ideas for initiatives that you can discuss with your leadership or your staff to help accomplish. But we're very excited about this updated self-assessment tool, and we encourage all CMLS members to go in and to utilize it.
And Chris, I would ask, this is a CMLS only benefit, and it is our first. We've had people try it and use it and test it, but we would definitely appreciate feedback to how do we continue to build on this and make it a really helpful tool for our members. And so appreciate any and all feedback. And if you want to talk to staff about it, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to walk through it with you and do anything we can to support our members.
And again, even if you're an MLS and you're proud of what you do, there's at least 2 or 3 things I guarantee that you'll find to say, wow, this is a really good idea. This is something that we can turn on right now and have it actually make an immediate impact on services or something else for the betterment of our MLS. The next item that I want to briefly discuss is Making the Market Work initiative. This has been a project. This has been a project offered by CMLS, and just so you understand that it's nothing that we just sent out once and just have it sit there. This is really an opportunity for MLSs to go and to utilize some of the materials in Making the Market Work. It is updated. From what I understand, Brian Barrero from 1000 Watt just went through and made some updates to the process. To the materials that are available. I can tell you from my own personal experience at Metro MLS that we actually went in and we created one of our value proposition videos by content from Making the Market Work. So there's plenty of good content in there. And again, is there any MLS in the country that can say that we do enough to communicate our value proposition or remind members why we are in fact their most important tool on their belt? I would say probably not. So it's worth your while to look at that and to utilize those materials. And finally, the CMLS 2019 strategic initiatives. If you are a member of CMLS, everybody should have received an email yesterday that had 2 different items in it. Number 1, a questionnaire or a bullet point list of, are you asking these questions in your boardroom, along with a variety of different topics ranging from value of MLS to timely topics in our industry such as consolidation, collaboration, the focus of new business models within our ranks of MLS participants, to some of the challenges of off MLS listings, as well as ease of transaction, data flow and protection, the future of home search. The point of this is to offer an intelligence report from a broad industry perspective where it's fed in by a select group of folks that are involved with the CMLS Board of Directors and what we call the IAC, which I'll let Danae talk a little bit about. But really, these are folks involved in the industry who come with many different hats on and discuss, here's what's important and happening and impactful in the industry. I think from an MLS executive's point of view, I was just telling Danae, I'm preparing for my board, one of my Board of Directors meetings next week. And before I went through and actually built my agenda, I utilized this yesterday as soon as I got it to go through to check my agenda. And I can tell you, I actually added a couple of pieces or tweaked a couple of pieces of my agenda as a result of this. And so, again, this is just yet another value that you have or a benefit for being a member of CMLS, where this is information that we want to make sure that we get in front of your eyes so that hopefully you get it in front of your leadership's eyes. And again, it makes sure that you're making not just good decisions, I think, in your boardroom, but you're making ones that build on your relevancy. Danae, is there anything that you would add to that?
That's it. We did highlight on here the 3 specific focus areas that we're working on this year. And this topic today and the hot topic sheet, I think, kind of covers a little bit of all of those. So that's it. I think we're ready to jump in the meat and potatoes.
Wonderful. So with that being said, thank you for listening to me. I'll turn it over to Danae Evans, CEO, who will introduce today's panelists. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Chris. I'm not sure it was said, so I want to say it now. This is being recorded, and we will post it later. So if you want to revisit it or share it, the webinar is being recorded. And then the goal of today's topics, I really want to just cover with you. Maybe not so much tactical takeaways, but really looking to have those 30,000-foot conversations about the important topics. We're pulling from this hot topic sheet that is being crafted, and hoping that this will help foster strategic conversations within our boardrooms, between conversations of colleagues and peers and industry partners, in an effort to shape the future of our industry. So with that, I would like to jump into the two topics that we did pull out of this when talking with the group, that we thought data flow and the protection of that data, but not in a negative term, but making sure it retains its gold star standard. So the flow of data and how we ensure that it is still that gold star standard, and also the ease of the transaction. And while MLSs are not in all parts of it, but it's such an important piece right now, how can we help participate and make that? I will say I'm a little questioning whether we'll get to ease of transaction, because we've got so many great topics on data flow. And then also want to let you know, we do have that question and answer box. Betsy is on it from CMLS team, and she's going to help us manage those and step in when it makes sense to ask those questions. We may have different stopping points, but please use the question and answer box and we will try to get to those. So with that, I would like to introduce our panelists. We're going to have now 50 minutes to run through this conversation. And today's format, I really want to have it be conversational. I didn't want anyone just presenting, but to sort of build and brainstorm off of each other. I joked with some of them and said, I want to feel like we're like at the end of a conference day and we all met up in the bar and we're like now just brainstorming and pinging off each other of what we heard, what we learned, and what we think could be the future. So as a little bit of the structure, so if I can kick off and ask Sam to start us, and then we'll go in order of the pictures on the screen, if everyone, and then you can get a little familiar with their voices as well. So Sam, thanks for joining us, and if you'll kick it off.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Danae. Excited to be here. We've got a great group of people. So I think this was the interesting part of the conversations we've had with our panelists today. Did you just want me to introduce myself?
Well, yeah.
Hi, everybody.
With a little intro why you're excited to be on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I am with RISO. I'm the CEO of RISO, and I know a lot of you from my time on the brokerage side and through MLS policy and data management work with the National Association of Realtors. So we're excited to be here talking about the future of technology and how we can build better partnerships between brokers and MLSs to reinforce that value of the cooperative and of the technology and data side. So looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Lauren?
Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Lauren Hansen, CEO of IRIS, which is a regional MLS in northern Colorado, and a self-declared data geek, so I look forward to the conversation.
Fabulous. Shelley?
Hi, everybody. I'm Shelley Specchio. I'm CEO of Mybor Realtor Association. And before you think, why is there an association person talking about all the MLS stuff, we also run the Broker Listing Cooperative, which is our coined term for the MLS here in Indiana. Thank you for having me.
I do want to call out that both of those two ladies are past presidents, chairs of CMLS, so they've got a little tie in there. And then next, Tehran, if you would take a second.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Lauren, if you're self-declared, I think other people have declared me a data geek, so we run in good circles. I'm Tehran Tekin. I'm a Director of Industry Relations at Zillow Group, co-founder of Bridge Interactive, and also have the pleasure of serving on as a director on the board of RISO.
Fabulous. All right. Thanks, everyone. And I'm going to kick it off by sharing a statement. I was just at the IOI Summit in Seattle last week, and something that Bob Goldberg said from stage was this, we hear this innovator and disruptor conversation all the time, and he separated it between an innovator is somebody who is within the industry and thinking about new and different ways to continue doing what we're doing, but then a disruptor is somebody who's from outside the industry trying to just really mess things up and is not seen as a positive, I guess is how I'd put it. So today's conversation, we're all in the industry, and I really want to push this innovative thinking. How do we help improve our industry, think about new ways to do it? It's not just, is, how can we do this better? Is there a better way to do this? To me, that's innovation, a better way to do things. And so I want to kick it off by saying, everyone is looking for, from the consumers, the agents, the brokers, they're looking for a little easier transaction. And so how do we foster that efficiency and make sure that, the frustration that we're hearing in some of those conversations, I'm seeing right now that the frustration is causing these alternate paths to be built, off MLS, pocket listings. But how can we make sure that the MLS is the partner in creating these efficiencies? And so these paths that are built are with and through the MLS and not necessarily around us. So if I could have each of you share with me what you think is the biggest opportunity that MLSs have to improve this efficiency and this, make these paths, make MLSs partners within the industry, and not, sometimes I hear maybe roadblocks would be a word to use. So who wants to be first and take that? Where's our biggest opportunity to be a better partner within the industry?
Well, I'll go. This is Shelley. I had an experience just the night before last with one of my members that I think it really gave me a good example of better communication. So we were at a fundraiser event, and we stepped aside to have a conversation about a frustration that she has. And she's one of the members in our marketplace who most often holds listings off. And so it gave me an opportunity to really ask her why. And one of her reasons was because a nuance, something specific to our marketplace, is assessors have access to our database. And so she asked me why. And so in our world, I hope I don't steal the thunder of a later question, Danae, but in our world, whenever I've inherited a lot of things that we just do here, and I always ask the question why, and we need to make sure that it's not just because we've always done that. So now I'm going to take the time to really investigate why. Why do they? What's the quid pro quo for that? What are we getting in return? And maybe that will solve one of her pain points. So my big takeaway was more and more communication. I didn't realize that she was engaging in this practice because she felt that she couldn't trust her client's information to be in our MLS database, which is such a horrible thought. So that's mine, communicating what are the frustrations and finding ways to solve them.
And I'll jump in. I think that one of the things with the easier transaction and efficiency, it kind of piggybacks on what Shelley just said, is one of the areas that I sense is the timing. So if a request is received for a data feed and we need time to review that, or with all of the innovation that is going on, it doesn't always fit neatly into a box, or there are things that we need to confirm that they're working with one of our subscribers and it's not coming in randomly, that we want all of your data, which I always like to say, I bet you do. And so we have to do kind of our own vetting process, but I also think we need to be cognizant of the fact that time is money, and so the more efficient we can be in that approval process, the happier people are, and it also speaks to the overall balancing act that we all face between providing the information and protecting the information.
That is a tricky balance. I see it, the protect the information, keep it that gold star data, but still continue that efficient flow of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is Teron. I jotted down a couple points, and my perspective is slightly different than the other panelists, just because I'm on the vendor side and also a technology provider side, right? So for us, it's number one, adhere to standards. Critically important. It makes life easier for everybody across the board. Be responsive, right? I know that you get a lot of requests as MLS executives and staff. Being responsive and letting everyone know what's going on. critically important. And then when you are aware of changes that affect data flow, give us a heads up. Those things I don't think overly difficult. Some do it great. Some have areas of improvement there. And then, as Lauren was saying, you need to vet. There's a lot of change. There are a lot of new requests. There's data being used in new and different ways that, frankly, the industry hasn't thought about or had to contend with in the past. And that's okay. Change can be scary, but change it can be great as well. So the need for MLS to vet the use case, I think, is absolutely there. But I'd offer the challenge: vet, but vet with the assumption of good intent, right? When you're vetting and the assumption is that there's something nefarious going on, that slows down the works, and I don't think is overly beneficial to anybody.
Great.
Just to key in on that, it's in a similar vein to Taran's points there. It's really about a philosophy from the start that, brokers are being challenged, and brokers are partners of the MLS. And when we're looking at new ways of using data, or even traditional ways of getting better data, getting better access to data, having a philosophy as an organization that the brokers and their technology vendors are partners. And there's certainly a need for the MLS to guard the data, to the extent that it's not misused, to have very clear guidelines for the use of that data, but also to proactively look for ways to engage brokers with better data, with more data. And I get phone calls from MLS organizations who say, the agents and brokers are asking for more fields. They're asking for these new fields. Do we have to give it to them? When the question should really be, is it damaging to the marketplace? Well, certainly we need those protections in place, but how can we get better data to our brokers and to our partners who are agents and their vendors? How can we allow them to innovate in a marketplace that's very challenging for them, not just for the cost structures, but because of what the other companies in the industry and outside the industry are able to do with significant capital and with technology. And we really have to be empowering our broker partners at the MLS level with the best data, the best technology, and frankly with processes and systems that automate some of these processes, that simplify them, that make them quicker. So I have fewer of the broker vendors calling me and saying, I can't believe this process, it's so expensive and it's so slow, what can I do? We really need to encourage those companies to be able to help our brokers and to help them innovate in a faster way.
That makes me think, Sam, and I had some questions around, the data that we're collecting today, right? Those data points and those requests that are coming in, you're talking about, and some more conversation I'm hearing. Would you guys share what you think? How is the data we're collecting going to evolve? What are some new data points or some new ways we need to think about? Because it sounds like there's a little challenge between this innovation side of this is how we've done it, this is typically the data, and now that needs to evolve because it's big data, but what are all those parts and pieces? And I'll throw out a couple things I thought about, like smart home data, maintenance of the home, transfer of the home. Like, how do you see more of those data points either being stored in the MLS collecting them, layering them in with the existing data they have? How do you guys see that data collection and the data points evolving over the next 3, 5, 10 years? How do we need to be thinking about what to get?
Danae, before we launch into that, I would like to do a bit of a rewind, and though I completely agree with what Taran said, and I try to assume good intentions, it wouldn't be fair if we didn't also mention that there are bad actors. And there have been instances where our data from Northern Colorado has appeared on sites that we've never heard of. And when we dig into it and contact them and say, don't seem to have a licensing agreement on file for you, and then the site is subsequently brought down. So unfortunately, those kinds of experiences keep us wary, and yet it is our job to protect and, it's back to that balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll let somebody else lead off with your additional question, but I did want to interject that.
No, and I did write that down, that what Teron said about the assumption of good intent, but it is a challenge.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. That's like
Absolutely.
a hashtag right there.
Not belittling the important job of protecting your data, Lauren. And I know that's a big initiative for you.
Well, especially when it's a surprise site that just pops up, and then the questions begin. How did they get it?
All right. I'm going to hashtag that one, but I would love to see how in that vein of, these new requests coming in and, vet but inspect, or what type of data do you guys see? How will that change? How I've talked a lot about the difference that photos play into search and input, and usually scraping is a bad thing in our industry, but scraping data from photos to fill in data points. So who's got some thoughts and ideas of how that evolves?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about that because it's, this was sort of a big topic when we went through sold data, and should we be accessing sold data and publicizing it at the broker level? Should it become part of automated valuations? And it became clear that this was going to happen industry-wide, or it would be happening within a lot of organizations, whether or not the brokers had access to it. Whether or not they could do it, there would be organizations who would gather this information and use it to collect those consumer eyeballs. And so today we still have organizations that sometimes feel that that's their value, is protecting that kind of data, for not letting it get out to anyone except within a closed, non-public space. But we're seeing that the world evolves faster than that. It's never really been, it's absolutely important that we protect it, and we have licensing rights, and we have clear licensing and display rules. And this is something we hear from brokers is make the rules clear up front, make it easy for me to understand them, and I can tell you that my product will follow those rules. So in terms of the kinds of data that we're going to be looking at going forward, and I appreciate Teron calling out standards, because that's a big part of being able to not just use data within the MLS, but to have it be shared between all of a broker's technology tools and all of the agent's technology tools, is looking at what's coming next with data standards. I mean, we've got, internet tracking data, finding out what your tools, whether they're getting ROI, whether they're getting used by the brokers, by the agents, by their customers. And you have to be able to track all of this great data we've got within the MLS that sometimes doesn't appear in reports. It doesn't appear in an actual way that a broker can see what value they got out of that. We've got, as you mentioned, Danae, home energy information. We've got customer information and lead information. And for those tools to be able to exchange that data so that an agent can use an app, a consumer can use an app, and the broker and MLS can see how much are we spending on this tool, how many folks are using it, and really get that kind of feedback to make better business decisions and use your resources in a more intelligent way. It's really important to be able to adopt those standards and get the most out of the data within and outside the MLS.
Sam, this is Shelley. Am I allowed to ask questions of the panel?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I want to say, what do you do, or how do we, to the whole group, how do we work when it's not the brokers who are asking the MLS to step up and be more innovative, but it's the brokers who don't want that data out there, like the sold data, or don't add anything new? What do we do when it's, because usually the conversation in these sorts of things is the MLSs are not moving fast enough to serve the brokers in the marketplace. What about when the brokers in the marketplace don't want to change and don't want to move and don't see that evolution that's happening faster than as you described? How do we address that?
To me, that's a
was
sales
that for me?
job.
Go ahead, Lauren.
For anybody who could answer that. I feel like it's sometimes the case and we don't touch on it enough. There was a bunch you said there. But if the brokers won't let you add the fields, they don't think smart home information is important and it might create liability for their agents, so don't go there. Or we don't want any internet tracking tools because that might lead to leads, and we handle the leads, and you stay out of that MLS. How do we address some of those things so that we can keep the marketplace moving forward?
Well, I'll touch on it quickly, and then I'll let the other folks speak. From my perspective, there's a reason that CMLS is looking at national policy, and it's because there are certain things that we have a responsibility for, whether we're in administration, within the trade organizations, within an MLS, to help those folks along who are our participants who may not see the light yet about technology, that this isn't something that we're going to be able to hide from, and it's just going to pass us by. And so maybe that's why that's part of CMLS's drive right now for national policy is there. But I also would say maybe we're not hearing from all the right brokers. Maybe we've got new and innovative companies who haven't made their way through our governance systems in the MLSs and boards. For whatever reason that those processes are in place, maybe we need to find ways to have more innovative and technology-minded voices in those conversations.
For me, I think it is a sales pitch, and sometimes I heard recently whether the MLS is also juggling listening versus leading. The green energy fields or the home efficiency fields were probably the best example because, and I'm going to show my slip a bit. I think it also depends on the demographics of the brokers that you're talking to, because when we were talking about all those green certifications and adding them, and they aren't required, but if you have them, we want to be able to collect that information. Our point was the consumers are ahead of you on this. They're already asking for this information. And if the brokers are the ones who are in the way so that the MLS can't innovate, I think we need to point out that consumers want this. You may not be asking for it today, but we want you to have the answers when you are asked those questions. So to me, it's about helping them save time and the value of it, or keeping them out of trouble, or making more money. So I sort of lean toward the sales pitch and also consumer versus average broker.
I'm going to refrain from responding because I don't think I can contribute to this without this being a bridge sales pitch. So I will recuse myself.
Well, I appreciate that. So I had this, I wrote this down, Lauren. You said you're listening versus leading. Very interesting concept of most of us, and I would say the people on this webinar are listening to so they can understand what is happening nationally and help their members, their customers stay ahead of that curve. And so how do you listen, do that sales pitch, but also leading? And so I'd say maybe is there some strategies or tactics that you've used to, they don't know what they want yet. They don't know what's coming. So how are some of you helping to lead and listening for that feedback, as you said, the sales pitch, but also helping people understand, who moved my cheese, but we've got to move the cheese.
For me, it is, frankly, remaining vulnerable and really paying attention to what's out there. A local example is my neighbor just listed and sold her house. They had an open house, and I dropped in just to see what was going on. I can't tell you how long it's been since I've been to an open house, but I talked to the broker, and I noticed that she had flyers, for instance, that didn't come from our system. I want to dive deeper into that. Is that something, can we partner with that company? Is that, because ours look like they came out of an MLS system rather than a graphic department. So I think it is taking a fresh view of where are those friction points, where are those areas that we can have a role and help and streamline.
Yeah, I agree, Lauren. It goes back to that, my first sort of thing I said too, is just communication. You don't know what you don't know till you go out and listen and ask for it. And I think I do think that we I think we all want to move forward, and I think those were all really good points about who's at your tables and who are you listening to, and then once you have gained all that information, how do you then step forward and lead, perhaps? Tough, but good.
All right, so I'm going to go to my next question here that we've been talking about, the data points and standardization, and something that's come up recently is how MLSs are thinking about their systems, and I'm going to call it the database. Most times I hear MLSs call about, it's their vendor, but we do have, Lauren, you're on the phone today, and you have your own in-house, what's referred to in-house shop, and build your own system. So I've been hearing this come up a lot recently as to how are MLSs thinking about their database, what are the needs of that database, and how do we see it possibly evolving to the future to meet these needs of new data points coming in, having to layer these data, whether it be photos or whatnot. So who's got some thoughts on the future of MLS databases?
I'd like to jump in here a little bit, and if you'll permit me, this might take a second or two for me to get through. The reality is that I spend a tremendous amount of time thinking about data and what data flows through our systems, through the MLS, what the future of data looks like. My kids think it's so cool. But when I think about it, I really kind of have two central themes, and they're kind of intertwined. So I'm going to start, going down one path, and you'll see it'll come full circle to the second theme. So if you bear with me, I think I can get through this. I love the fact that we're talking about more information being collected at the MLS. Yes, some people will be in favor of adding more, some people will put up resistance, so on and so forth. But the reality is that ultimately, I think it's an admirable goal for us to try and think about how do we simplify the process through the transaction. What data can we collect that's important up front? All of that are admirable goals, and I think will promote the industry going forward. But the reality is that we still struggle a little bit with current industry infrastructure. And so, if you stop and you think about what's happening with API, API mandated 3 years ago by NAR. We're seeing about 16% adoption, meaning for every 100 data consumers, 16 are using API, but 84 are continuing to use RETs. Well, API was brought about and mandated because it's a technology upgrade to RETs, right? It's an improvement that's supposed to make things easier, faster, more efficient, cheaper, whatever. And there's some issues there. So we have, as an industry, we have work to do there. Why is this better tool? Why is this tech upgrade being underutilized? And then you think about API's sort of kissing cousin, and that's the data dictionary. And what an incredible project that is. I mean, stop and think. It's taking real estate, which is different from every person on this call's market, right? Real estate is local, different from place to place, but it's finding out what is common about real property and describing it, and agreeing on a way to talk about that in a database, right? It's an amazing project, and as far as I know, all APIs distribute data using the data dictionary fields, not the fields that are in your MLS database, not your unique native data field names. And so, extrapolate that a step forward, and what does that really mean? Well, all of your members, right, who are creating listings are using a different set of field names, describing properties differently when they enter those listings than the data recipients that are receiving the data out of your database, right? So the data in is completely different than the data out, and there are some problems inherent in that. I'll point out Stellar MLS, I think, is, as far as I'm aware, and I'm sure others are working on it, but they're the only ones that have migrated their native database to data dictionary field set, and I think that that's an amazing advantage for them. But the vast majority of the industry has yet to take that on, and why? Well, because that's hugely disruptive to your membership, right? It's like more than a mini conversion. It's a substantive change, and then this is where it sort of comes back to the other theme, which is, thinking. It might be time for the industry to start thinking about thinking differently about the MLS database, right? So when I say MLS database, almost everybody that's on this call thinks Matrix, Paragon, Flex, Rapatoni, Navica, Inovia, Stratus, and if I'm forgetting one, then I apologize. But that's the way that we think about it, right? And those are your platform vendors. Well, maybe it's time for the MLS industry to think differently about that. What would happen if MLS owned and operated their own database, right? And making changes, swapping out platform providers, doesn't mean that every single one of your members is affected, right? Because you're controlling the database. If someone's making, if the person that you've tasked with managing and administering your database is keeping up with things the way that you want, then that's great. But when they're not, you let them go and you bring somebody else in, and the database stays the same. So you don't have that problem of disrupting the workflow of your members because they now have to learn a completely new platform. And then I'm almost finished. Then if you stop and you think about how that plays into what we're talking about, which is adding more data sets, trying to get further into the transaction, well, how much easier is it if MLS operates, owns that database to add those field sets, right? And it's not so disruptive. So I'm certain that that anybody that's on the call that works for one of the companies that has the products that I listed is probably shooting holes in me right now. But I'm just posing it as food for thought.
I would definitely love our panelists to jump in here, and I don't think you're recommending that everyone is firing vendors. I think it is more the question that it's how do we think about that relationship differently, a little more your own, just changing the way we think about them. And I think just the simple thing of saying, calling it what the product is versus the database and how that approach and that relationship, because I know all of those partners that you named, everyone is really innovating and pushing and working to help foster what that looks like. So I think it's that change in thought process. And Sam, I think I saw you say you wanted to weigh in on that one.
Sure. I think Tehran's exactly right in terms of the overall direction. Whatever software provider you use for your MLS software services, that's great. But as an MLS, thinking about yourself as database independent in the long term gives you more flexibility. And there's a cost to that. There's no doubt. If you're going to manage a database internally, does your MLS have technology staff to be able to do that? Or do you need to outsource to an organization that can allow you to have an independent database? And again, this is where all the front end of choice and system of choice and alternate input and edit tools are coming from in the future, which agents are going to want. They're going to want to be in the home with their customer and update the price on whatever app they happen to be using. This really is the future of the technology standards. The Web API is going to have or really has an update standard already. It isn't implemented all over the industry yet. There's a RETS update standard that has been used, but thinking of your MLS's database as its own entity that you control, certainly you may have a vendor running it, but it's separate from the technology and the software we layer on top of that. And so I did want to mention, as Tehran was talking about Stellar, First MLS has a native data dictionary database as well. So again, when you know that your data is already on a standard, you don't have to constantly convert and change that when you're adding your data to new tools or sharing it with different tools. When you know what your business rules are for your MLS, when you have them fully documented, all of the things that are not necessarily fun to do, but all of your listing input, edit, update rules, you can go to different software vendors and have them build new tools for you that will allow you to have multiple interfaces for your brokers and your agents. It will allow you to have apps that can do updates and can add edit listings, et cetera. So it's really thinking about not only being database independent at some point in the future, or finding a way to partner with someone that will allow you to do that, so you've got that flexibility, but also doing that in a way that is natively using standards. So you have those options. So your brokers can hire technology staff, frankly, at a lower cost and have less training time because they understand what a modern API looks like. Your vendors who bring new innovative products into the industry for the brokers and agents can scale quicker across the industry if they know they're going to be using common modern APIs. They're going to be using standardized data feeds. And this is, again, where we get back into the national policy where we say, if we can say an IDX feed is this, a VAL feed is this, a broker back office feed is this, and the entire country agrees that's what that can look like, then we don't have minor arguments about, I'm not sure if I want to give away this field or that field nearly as often. And technologists can build tools that can immediately serve agents and brokers all across the country. It just brings a lot more innovation opportunities for us.
Lauren or Shelley, do either of you have something? Lauren, I know you do your own in-house, so any thoughts?
We do. In a broader sense, with everything going on and having come from long ago several standard vendors, the time involved that you wait to have something implemented, and I understand they have a customer base that they need to support and transition and all the rest of it, versus having our own in-house, is night and day. However, it has its own challenges of choosing where the priorities are, and kind of tying back to what you said earlier, Shelley. This is an example of, if I went to my board tomorrow and said, should we make Web API a priority? They would look at me cross-eyed like, I don't know what you're talking about, and are you kidding? And it doesn't help me make more money, so why am I? And yet, what Sam just said about when all of us are on Data Dictionary and able to accommodate, so that a national provider, a brand new app, something innovative, can come into many markets at a time and create this service that's available, it will make sense. Today it doesn't, but we're getting there. I think we're in the process, and I think the statistics that Tehran mentioned of the 16%, that's pretty amazing. But it's better than 1%. but it certainly isn't half and half yet. So we haven't reached the tipping point.
No, there's no doubt, and that percentage is low, Lauren. But it is, it is increasing steadily, right? And so we do see it increasing. We see more and more MLSs adopting the tech, and we see more and more vendors utilizing the tech, and slowly but surely seeing more and more of them actually asking for it. And look, everybody who's on the panel leads and leads well, and so I'll put this out there when it comes to the industry. Those on this call, get it. We see the promise of standards and new technology, and sometimes your membership is reluctant to change or poses the questions why. I hate that question. This is the way that I kind of think about it. I have 2 teen daughters. If I want to communicate with them in a way that's not face-to-face, it's via Snapchat. I really didn't want to learn how to use Snapchat. I really thought that text and email was pretty good, and as a last resort, maybe a phone call. But if I want to communicate with them, I use Snapchat, and so that's what I do. And I guess what I'm really trying to say there, when it comes to new technology and standards, everyone that's on this call, leaders sometimes just have to step up and lead, and not follow.
Well said, and I'm also signing up for Snapchat to follow you right now.
Done.
So one takeaway: sign up for Snapchat. I have to tell you, there was the kissing cousins was something else that was said that I wouldn't have thought would have come out of today's call. So thank you for both of those, Teron. Signing up for Snapchat, Snapchat, and kissing cousins.
I am from the South, and I live in Atlanta, so
okay.
Kissing cousins.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes left in the webinar, and we did not get to ease of transaction. I don't know that I want to try and put that in right here, but I think maybe if we could finish up with 4 of us on here, maybe saying if each of you could give your idea of what you see the future of the MLS is, that is sort of where we've talked about this, how looking at the databases in the future, how that happens, combined with what data we're going to need to be collecting and keeping, really, one of you said, how do we keep the broker ahead of the consumer, right? Making sure that what the consumer is going to be asking for, the MLSs are collecting, that we're making sure that's part of our process. So what do you see the future of the MLS is in regards to that? And the one thing that you would say that you think is the most important for people on the call to take back and discuss in their boardrooms that would help us shape that innovative, fostering an innovative environment for MLSs in the future?
I'll go. I've been in this industry for 13 years. I have watched, seen, studied, and I still believe that MLS is in the best position to manage the creation, the licensing, and the distribution of real estate data. I don't see that changing in any way, shape, or form, no matter how how MLS might evolve in the future. That is, its core competency. I think there's no other entity that that handles that better than MLS, and I don't see that changing. And what do I want everyone on the call to bring back to their boardroom? I think I stepped out on dangerous ground with some of the people that we work with on a daily basis. So let them know that I absolutely did not say that you should fire CoreLogic or Black Knight or Rapatoni or any of the other platform vendors. They provide an incredible service. I'm just trying to stoke some imagination, some new way of thinking.
And I would just add to that, Teron, I think it's a new way of how that partnership happens and what is the innovation and the fostering of those ideas. So yeah, to be clear, I didn't take that as what you said, and it's just yeah, just this new place to stand and talk about and think about that relation and how things are approached or evaluated, and just how those relationships continue to evolve, because they're all very important parts. MLS is making the market work. Well, it involves all those stakeholders and participants to make that happen. So, yeah, hopefully no one took it that way, because that was not what it was. But all right, who's next?
I'll jump in. I'm pondering in the meantime, Tehran's, that the future of the MLS is licensing and distribution, and yet I'm thinking, which feels external, and there's nothing wrong with external and having those partners or third-party enhancements and all of that. But I guess when you ask me about the future of the MLS, I'm looking within my walls and where my paths are leading, and I think more information but integrated and simple is where we're likely headed. One of the things, for instance, that is not easy and solved in our marketplace, we have uploaded documents. They're basically attachments. They can be HOA, they can be lead-based paint disclosure, seller property, it could be a host of things related to one listing. The only way that those can be shared today is if one of our subscribers, one of the brokers, has a client relationship, and we have sort of this prospect website, if you will. So the client can log in and see not only the listing information, but they also, with permission of the listing broker, can see those uploaded documents. Well, if one of our brokers is doing a deal with a broker across the state and they're not a subscriber, they still need those documents, or their client does, but we don't have an efficient way to make that happen today. So that's one example, but I think the possibilities are endless. With GIS, absolutely fascinates me, and I think MLSs have done a weak job of making that part of our system. You know, heat maps. If you wanted to look at your inventory on a heat map, we can pull them up on a map today with little dots, but heat maps are just more sexy and useful, and the data layers that could be added are crazy. Yelp comes to mind. How do we integrate with that? Because the consumers are already using it on a regular basis. State demographics. Colorado happens to have an amazing database repository of all kinds of things, influx and outflux of population and all kinds of breakdowns. Or is there a local university you could be working with? So I think the possibilities are endless, and makes this job continually fun.
It is continuing fun. I agree, Lauren. I don't have much to add to that because, Lauren, you covered it so beautifully, and I'd really like the last word to have sexy heat maps included in it. So I'll pass off for Sam for the last word.
Well, can I just say sexy heat maps again then? No, thank you. Those are great points. I really think if you're looking at, the future of the MLS, looking at it under the light right now that we're all seeing of expanded things happening off MLS, and how is the MLS going to find innovation opportunities to bring that business into the MLS marketplace to continue to enhance that value. And it's really about providing clarity for brokers and technology vendors, about having digital processes, clear, simplified licensing and display rules. And we see these initiatives happening where some MLSs are coming together and saying, let's make this easier. Let's make some common data rules that we can all agree to a 90-95% extent. Let's have digital application processes. Part of the joint initiative between RISO and CMLS on data access marketing is to be able to make it simple for a technology company to come to an MLS's website and say, here are the 10 things I need to know to get started. And I may find out right away, I can't afford to work in this marketplace because the pricing's right there, or the process will take too long. And it just adds that clarity for the brokers and their partners to be able to move forward, to take what people are doing with Coming Soon and Off MLS listings, and to bring that into the MLS, to give them ways to delay showings or have a short-term period where they're limiting the public exposure, but they're still encouraging the cooperation between brokers, and all the brokers can see the listings so that consumer benefit still exists, that we're making sure we're getting that cooperative benefit there through more innovative technology techniques and continuing to bring that within the fold.
Great. Well, I think I have two questions here I wanted to just address. One that came in from Lori, who said that the key to moving ahead with the greater good is to educate the least tech savvy in every MLS so they're not afraid of change and can understand its importance. I think that's a really, it's a great point. And I think not just even in the MLSs, I think that goes back to Lauren's statement of listening versus leading, is listening to, you know, there is that fear of change but how do we help inspire and let them see the opportunity in that change? So that's from a leading place of where we need to go so that they can be equipped with the tools to meet the consumer needs. So the one thing, and then also there was, I think Victor, you had asked about Red Plan's pre-approved list for vendors. And we have continued to try and talk about that, but the attorneys always get a little bit freaked out when we bring that conversation up. And so we haven't made a lot of progress, but it was kind of, the concept has been a TSA pre-check for vendors. So we're still sort of exploring it, but it seems like there could be some challenges there. And then the last thing I wanted to end with is, Shelley did mention a little bit, she didn't go too much, but we were doing a site visit for CMLS 2020 in Indianapolis, and I got to visit her office, and she has a swear jar set up. I said, well, my goodness, do you have an issue with people running around your office swearing all the time? And Shelley was nice enough to share with me that no, it's actually her. The swear jar is when it said, that's how we've always done it. If that's the reason you're doing it, is just that's how we've always done it, then somebody has to contribute to that. So I'd say, not that all of you need to go out and set up your own swear jars, although you totally could. It's more about that concept of if that's how we've always done it, that's great, but let's evaluate that. Let's really discuss that and see, you know, especially with this data and innovation and how quickly everything is changing, is there a better way to do this? Not because this is how we've done it and can we do what we did before better, but do we have a better way to go about it? Is there a better way to meet the needs of the market, our customers, subscribers, and the consumer? So this being our first webinar, I appreciate on specifically the hot topics. I appreciate everyone participating today. Always appreciate feedback. If there's other topics that you would really like covered, different formats, please let us know. And thank you to my panelists for being willing to participate in this and share your insights. And everyone, thanks so much. And please make sure and check out the newly released self-assessment tool. I think our initial URL was not correct, but if you just go to cmls.org, it's on there, councilofmls.org/assess your MLS. So thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your time today, and go out there and continue to make the market work. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.